3, 2, 1.
Okay, so DMP use cases. I always found it really difficult to talk about DMP use cases because, there are literally dozens of individual use cases that can be executed via a data management platform. And, I think people get too focused on individual use cases, and what they should do instead is abstract to, a higher level, looking at the core value pillars of the data management platform, which for me are insights and analytics, audience management and portfolio management, personalization of creative and content, and finally, I think there's a strong case to be made for identity management as a core value pillar of the data management platform. So, like I said, there are dozens of use cases that sit underneath those value pillars. I'll talk about just a couple of examples within each category, just to give you a better sense of what it is that I'm talking about. So first, insights and analytics. I think the DMP is a really great tool in order to generate audience insights and in order to be able to build profile analysis reports, audience composition analysis reports, to get a much better understanding of the audiences that you're looking to target, to get a much better understanding of your existing customers, not just in terms of analytics and the way in which they're traversing through your owned and operated properties, but also in terms of their actual online behavior, the content that they're consuming, in terms of their demographic breakdown, in terms of their socioeconomic composition. I think the DMP can play a really vital role in planning and insight generation from that perspective. And I think if you extrapolate out some of those audience composition reports, you get to a point where you can look at audience analysis within the DMP in the context of comparison and contrasting different audiences, in the context of looking at user journey analysis and looking at the path to purchase. So I think there's a lot of different insights and analytics reports that you can pull out of the DMP that are specifically focused on audience segmentation. Second core value pillar, audience management and portfolio management. So really, we're just talking about the ability to be able to create audience segmentation for multiple different activation purposes. So I like to use the terminology portfolio management because I think that more and more we're seeing advertisers build dozens of segmentations using tools like data management platforms, and those segmentations I think are always on. The investment ebbs and flows through the year based on campaign objectives, based on specific requirements, but it's not as binary as on-off as it used to be. So I think that having a portfolio of audience segments that you can effectively invest in and divest according to whatever campaign objective you have or whatever specific requirement you have is a nice idea and a good way to think about the audience segmentation that you're creating. Obviously, that segmentation will span across the full spectrum of individual use cases. Retargeting, audience prospecting, could also include lookalike and act-alike modeling. So I think there's a dozen or so individual applications of that audience segmentation, but audience management, portfolio management within a centralized system of record, I think, is one of the core value pillars of the data management platform. The third core pillar, focusing on personalization of content and creative, clearly, a lot of that audience segmentation is used for the purpose of media decisioning, for the purpose of personalization and optimization of creative and content. And I think that for me, that falls into two broad categories. One is the real-time personalization of creative and content, looking at an individual user's attributes and characteristics in real time in order to be able to serve them the most relevant content, the most relevant creative at that point in time. And then the second category is a more long-term focus towards content strategy. So how do the audience insights that we derive through the DMP impact the way in which we think about inbound marketing? How do they impact the way in which we think about long-term content strategy? So two different ways in which I think the DMP can influence personalization of creative and content. The final core value pillar is a bit of a difficult one. So identity management, data onboarding, data matching, data transfer. I think this is more of a feature and a functionality of the DMP as opposed to a category of use cases, but you can't get away from the focus of advertisers and agencies on CRM onboarding as a major use case of the data management platform. So I think that the ability to be able to collect different data sets from different environments, particularly offline environments, CRM being a prototypical example, to be able to onboard that, to be able to match that with digital identifiers like cookie IDs and device IDs for the purpose of audience segmentation, for the purpose of insight generation, for the purpose of activation, suppression, exclusion, whatever it may be, I think is a core category of use cases around using the DMP. So that's it. I think, DMP use cases, there are dozens. Try and abstract and start to think about the 3 or 4 core value pillars underpinning the DMP. And I think once you start looking at those 3 or 4 value pillars, you can then really drill down into the individual use cases that you want to execute within those value pillars.